We interrupt this regular broadcast to bring you an urgent message. A nuclear event has occurred here in our very backyard. The perpetrators have been identified and retaliation towards them is imminent. The president is calling the retaliation program Protocol R/NuclearRevenge. May God have mercy. But not on those sons of bitches.
Free? That's not good enough, buddy!
Everyone dance to the beat!
I'll pay you an exposure.
Sure, I'll babysit your kid.
Unlimited brain power! This is truly my masterpiece.
This nuclear revenge story is called Always Have a Backup. Hello everyone, first time poster on this sub and relatively new to Reddit on the whole, so apologies in advance for any screw-ups on my part. This happened over a decade ago. I would have been 15 or so at the time. I was in my sophomore year of high school and this all takes place in my general science class for the year. Things started quite well in the class with a nice teacher who was passionate about her topic. Unfortunately, for one reason or another, a good 6 weeks later, classes were shuffled and we ended up with a new teacher. Our new teacher was an older guy, certainly less passionate and kind of dull, but otherwise harmless. To provide a little background, I was certainly a troubled student in high school, and troubled is putting it lightly. I was a great student, provided the teacher wasn't disrespectful and was actually interested in what they were teaching. There was nothing worse to me than a grumpy, bored, and disrespectful teacher. Now, this second gentleman was certainly bored and maybe a tad grumpy sometimes, but I wouldn't say he was necessarily disrespectful. He wasn't a good teacher, but he wasn't terrible either. He didn't ignite my passion for the subject by any means, but he was adequate. Then, for the second time that year, things got shuffled around on us and we were on our third teacher. This time, a brand new teacher at our school, a recently immigrant from the UK, we'll call her Mrs. Snow. She was middle-aged with reddish hair and a scowl so cold she could extinguish the sun. Mrs. Snow got into a routine quickly.
She made it very clear she would tolerate no misbehavior of any form.
And included with the category of misbehavior was interruption. And this meant any kind. I observed several students, even well-behaved, attentive ones, sent directly to the dean's office, with no warning or prior offense for having the sheer gall to sneeze while she spoke. And it didn't matter how much you try to cover it up. A friend of mine was unwell one day, but doing his best to make it through his class. Unfortunately for him, he had quite a dry cough, and hell hath no fury like Mrs. Snow. Poor bastard was jettisoned before the class even had the chance to be seated. And of course, it should go without saying that I was not on her good books. She was rude, unreasonably hostile, and clearly bored to tears by her subject. I don't recall how many lessons I saw to completion, but I certainly became eminently familiar with the dean's office that year. My favorite stories to tell are the days where she was in a bad mood. As if she wasn't horrible enough already. I remember more than once she kicked out the entire class. God knows what she spent the rest of the lesson doing, but I remember the poor receptionist in the dean's office. Her eyes practically bulged right out of her head as she saw a Congo line of 30-something students making their way to the office, all required to be written up by her and seen by the year's dean. I can't imagine she was too fond of Mrs. Snow either. But the dean came to the wonderfully well-thought-out conclusion that the students were clearly the problem, not the teacher. Now, one day during class, I was seated near the front of the class, right next to the computer Mrs. Snow was using to deliver her wonderfully monotone lecture on God knows what bollocks. I happened to notice a small red pen drive sticking out of the front of the machine. While she wasn't looking and most of the class was distracted, I bent down pretending to grab something from my backpack, which was on the floor below my stool, but quietly reached over and pulled the drive from the computer and stuffed it in my backpack before anyone could notice. I don't know why I did it, just being a prick I guess. I figured it's just a pen drive, she can't get a new one. Later that day, I plugged the drive into one of the PCs in our library to browse the content. Various things related to her class were scattered throughout, but then something in particular caught my eye. Her immigration documents. I took a short peek and discovered her visa was due to expire in only a couple of months, and that she had a new folder in which she was assembling her documentation for her next application. Oh crap, I thought. This flash drive was hot property. If she found out I had this, I would be in serious trouble. The obvious solution of quietly returning the drive never occurred to me. At first, I removed the red sleeve from the drive, hoping it would be unrecognizable. Even then, I was still nervous, so between classes one day I threw it on the roof of one of the buildings, and not a moment too soon. She found out, and someone had dubbed me in. I don't think I had ever been sent to the deans that fast in my entire school life. I was grilled, kinda like those CIA FBI interrogations you see on TV. But I didn't crack. I denied all knowledge and responsibility. They conducted a search on my backpack and found nothing. Just as well I tossed it. I was incredibly well known to the dean by that point, and I could tell she was more than ready to believe I'd done it, but she couldn't prove it. It was all he said, she said, so I was let go. I continued having classes with Mrs. Snow. She was incredibly hostile towards the entire class after that, but especially me. More than once during this time, I got sent to the deans for absolutely no reason whatsoever. The referral slip she sent me with always claimed some utter bull that never happened, and the dean would gobble up that crap up eagerly. Until one day, we had a reliever. And the next day, and the day after. That reliever became our new permanent teacher for the remaining 2 months or so of the year, actually. There was never any explanation as to why. Rumors began to spread, and eventually I learned the proper truth. The copy of her immigration documents on that pen drive were the master copy. She had no backups, hard copies or duplicates. New Zealand's immigration system is ridiculously pedantic in that you need to resubmit all of the evidence from previous visas you've been granted again when you apply for a new one. She no longer had any of it. She was missing crucial documentation to retain her visa status, and as such, her visa was declined and she left or was removed from the country. I had no reason to suspect she wouldn't have backups. Usually, you'd use a pen drive as backup and have a master copy on a computer somewhere. This was in the day before cloud storage was a thing, and pen drives were quite small in capacity and not particularly reliable at that. I remember having a few die on me during those years. Besides, what if you lost it? Anybody could poke through your crucial documents. It just seemed so unlikely that this would have been the case, and it's what I had assumed when I tossed the thing. Oh, but I was wrong, and she was never seen again. And that's the story how I accidentally and coincidentally got one of the worst teachers ever not only out of my school but removed from my entire country. Remember, kids, always, always, always have a backup. What can I say? Nuclear revenge was served. This nuclear revenge story is an exact opposite contrast to the previous one. Favorite teacher gets wrongfully fired, so I get 3/4 of the staff arrested. I'll start off by saying this happened to my sister, and the actions taken were hers. My sister has always gotten along very well with her teachers and has a habit of forming actual friendships with them, to the point that she still talks to her 5th grade English teacher along with many others decades later. This happened about 15 years ago. My sister was a student at Job Corps, a government-run live-on-campus vocational training program, studying hotel-motel management. She got on extremely well with her hotel-motel management teacher, better than pretty much every teacher she'd already had up to that point. One day, the teacher goes to the center's dean office and walks in on a paper shredding session. Turned out that there was some pretty major embezzling happening at the center. As in, more than 60% of the funds for the center were being stolen. The teacher was appalled and, despite some rather lucrative offers made, refused to join in on these acts. Less than a week later, the teacher was fired for trumped up reasons. This was especially bad given the teacher was only 2 years away from retiring, and being fired lost their retirement package. Needless to say, my sister was pissed. Knowing how things typically work and that almost any report she tried to make would be just swept under the rug, if it was taken seriously at all, she came up with a plan and took things nuclear. Over the next month or so, my sister managed to gather some basic evidence of the embezzling, nothing concrete but enough to warrant considerable investigation by the authorities. She took the little evidence she was able to gather along with the story of what happened to her teacher and sent the info in an email to the Job Corps regional director. Now, like I said, she knew that her email would likely be ignored or the event swept under the rug, so she got smart. The email was CC'd to every single major person in the Job Corps chain of command, all the way up to the national director, as well as to anyone even tangentially related to Job Corps in the upper echelon of the Department of Labor, and every member of Congress, as well as US President's office. Remember, this was a government-run program. All in all, the email was sent to over 2,000 people. 2 weeks later, after the investigation finished, never seen the government work so fast on anything that wasn't collecting owed taxes. Only 5 or 6 staff members out of 20ish that worked in the center still had their jobs. And at least 5 of the ones fired, including the dean, were facing major criminal charges, with the rest facing minor charges. I'm not sure of the exact figure of how much was stolen, but it was well into the 7 digits. The embezzling had been happening for years. The teacher got a very nice severance package post-investigation. It was 3 years of pay, her full retirement package, and a signing of an NDA. Though she didn't get her job back. And my sister was given her completion certificate despite not having finished the requirements of the course. They wanted her gone, but couldn't kick her out. Man, I have to applaud your sister for this one. It was really cool of her. It saved someone's basically livelihood and got some really nasty people behind bars. So congratulations to her for this nuclear revenge. Thank you for listening to these 2 awesome nuclear revenge stories. If you like them, please comment below, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification for more videos. And until the next video, cheers.